Hi, my name is Andrea Bruno. Welcome to Relationship-Based Retention Strategies. Really excited. This is my first webinar for DMC in this format, so I want to thank you all for joining us. You see Ashley's name on the screen here as well. Ashley is my colleague, and she's here to help with any kind of chat or technical things. If you have any issues at all, you can in the chat feature you can message her directly, and she can help you out. And we'll get going. Let's see if I can. Just so you all know, I've got a couple of screens happening. If I'm looking down at my computer, it's me looking at the chat. If I'm looking up, that's where I'm looking at you, and I have our slide deck over here, just so you all know. Okay. This is me, Andrea Bruno. I've been with Mwano Consultancy for about 2 years, and my role here is the Learning Model and Organization Transformation Consultant. And among other things, the core of my work is usually doing training facilitation, and we do everything from small group workshops, team building, problem solving, strategy sessions to larger scale full department trainings. And I also have been doing a lot of one-on-one leadership coaching as well with supervisors and managers. So that's something that I feel very passionately about. I've actually been doing coaching of professionals in various fields for the last 15 years. So it's really exciting to be able to offer that skill set to the work that we do here at DMC. All right, so the outcomes for today, here's what we're hoping you take away from this session. We hope that you leave here with a better understanding of how trust is fostered and how this impacts your employee experience and ultimately retention. We're also going to go over some really practical, tangible communication strategies that are going to help improve trust between employees and leaders, but really between any key relationships that you have within your organization. And then we're also going to give you a few strategies to help build your self-awareness and also leverage empathy within your relationships. It's also going to continue to foster trust and improve the relationship. So usually at DMC, we don't do cookie cutter solutions here. We really target everything that we do to our partners. So we're trying to bring that experience to you here as much as we can. So there will be opportunity to stop and reflect, and there'll be some prompts and activities for you to start thinking about how you can apply some of the concepts that we're talking about into your day-to-day. So get us started and to kind of meet each other here a little bit. I want to do a little icebreaker, which you can put right in the chat. Typically, we kind of go around the room, but where we're not able to share video and audio in this format, we're just going to use the chat feature to engage for now. And so really quickly, we'd just love to hear everyone attending here. Where are you located? Where are you joining us from? Oh, sorry, the chat was disabled. Thank you for those who found the Q&A chat feature. There we go. Portsmouth, Kittery, Portsmouth, Plymouth. A lot of Portsmouth crew. Welcome, Seacoast, Manchester, Rochester. We've got Vermont, Pembroke, Rochester. Wonderful. All right, so the chat's good to go now. There is some people found the Q&A. If you submit a question or a comment in the Q&A, that just goes to us as presenters, but we're monitoring both sides, so that's great. Also, second question, what are some of the roles that you have within your organization? That could be your title, or if you want to give a couple words about the work that you do for your organization. What types of role players do we have here? Operations manager, violence prevention educator. Oh, it's going very fast. Development and marketing manager. Leadership team, directing operations, HR management, senior finance specialist, client services, HR, volunteer and guest services coordinator, HR director, Chief Diversity Officer, Plymouth State, Director of Finance, DEI Coordinator, Housing Program Manager, Principal. Wonderful. And we have people here from all different types of organizations, education organizations, community outreach, a lot of HR, represented. That's fantastic. Okay, and judging by these titles, a lot of great experience present on this chat as well. So thank you for joining us. Okay, next question. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your level of energy in this moment as you join us today? 1 being the lowest. I dragged myself out of bed. I might still be wearing sweatpants. 5 being the highest. Super excited for this webinar today. There's no wrong answers. It's just nice sometimes to check in. Some 4s, 3s, 7s, 4, 3, 4, 5. 2.5. Yes. Good. Thank you. 3.5. It's good to check in with yourself every now and then and just be aware. All right, and I have a bonus question. I didn't write this down, but I just thought of it. What is your superpower when you think about who you are at work and what you bring to the table? What would you say is your superpower? Dependable, flexibility, collaboration, approachability, reliable, visionary, heart. Love that. Spreadsheets. We always need an organizer in the group. Cross-functional collaboration, dependable, getting stuff done, creativity, love. I love that. Calm, cool thinking in your leadership, optimism, amazing. This is a good group to be doing relationship-based session with. Okay, let's see if I can get my slide deck. As I toggle back and forth between my screens, I'm realizing it doesn't like what I'm doing. Okay, here we go. Just a couple notes on how to engage with us in this session. Please reflect and take notes. If you don't have something to write with, I encourage you to grab something real quick. Do not worry about feverishly writing down everything that's on the slides. We're going to share the slide deck with you after this, but take notes as a way of helping you kind of remember things that really resonate with you. And then there'll be a couple of opportunities and activities throughout where we ask you to reflect on how you might be able to apply some of the concepts that we're talking about. We do encourage you to share your ideas in the chat. That's the best channel for this format to engage with the people on session, and we'll ask your opinions and to add into the conversation. But do try to avoid going fully down a rabbit hole in a side conversation with someone, because we've got a lot to go through and you might miss some really good content. And we also encourage you to ask questions. You can do that right in the chat or in the QA chat as well. And we'll do our best to answer them. Anything that we don't get to, though, we will be able to see who submitted questions, and we are going to be following up with you offline if we don't get to it. All right, let's dive in. So this session is relationship-based retention strategies. So we're going to start by actually defining what we mean by relationships. And all of you probably have relationships at your work, that people that you kind of naturally like to work with, some people at work that you might consider friends, that you might hang out outside of work, a colleague or a mentor or a leader who has taken really good care of you and supported you, that you trust. So that's all great, but we want you to think about relationships, and especially in the context of retaining your best employees, as a core function of your role. And your relationships are just the dynamics between any person that you have to interact with or you have any level of interdependability within. So when we talk about workplace relationships, what we're talking about is the spoken or unspoken, or you could think of that as explicit or implicit expectations around the emotional, social, and operational interactions that are required for your business to do what it does, to achieve your mission, to achieve the work that you're doing. So it's not just who do you like, who do you not like. I have a boss, so I have to do something with that person. You know, there's some relationship there. Think about it as the interconnectedness of the ecosystem of your organization. And trust is the currency of your workplace relationships. And so when we say trust, if we asked 50 people to define that, there's going to be probably some common themes, but you're going to get different ideas about what it means to trust someone and what trust is. At its core, what I have found trust to be is a level of confidence that you have in the ability and willingness of others to consistently meet your needs and expectations. So ability is competence. Can you do it? And motivation is willingness. Are you willing to do it? And those are two separate things. And the level of trust that exists between your different relationships within your organization is the difference between what your expectations are and what you actually end up experiencing. So, for example, an explicit expectation I have had at an organization in the past is to respond to emails within 24 hours. So that's the expectation. If the reality that my colleagues or my boss experiences that I don't, if I go a week before responding to that email, that level of trust that I will meet that expectation, that I will respond in a timely manner, that they're going to get the information that they need from me in a timely manner, that trust is broken. If there's an expectation of 24-hour turnaround on emails and I meet that expectation very, very consistently, the level of trust is going to go up. So it's important then to know what some of the needs and expectations of your employees are. And some of this is going to seem really obvious, but what we found in our work is that it's really easy to miss some of these things, and it's easy to miss that there's a connection between some of these needs that are on the screen here and the level of trust that people feel between each other, between their leaders, and with their relationship to their organization. So these are some basic needs that every employee has: clear expectations, the training and resource to be able to meet those expectations, recognition, some level of autonomy. Being micromanaged does not feel good. It makes you feel like your boss does not trust you and that they think you're not capable of doing your work. So everybody needs some level of autonomy. It shows respect, it shows trust. Regular, honest feedback about how they're doing. Ongoing transparent communication. We're spending a time in this session on communication because that's one of the biggest impactors that we see that has an impact on the level of trust and the flow of the work that happens. It's often overlooked. Respect and belonging. These are really core needs and expectations that everyone really implicitly has when they show up at work. But as you get to know your employees more individually, you'll find that we're all unique human beings, and even within these categories, we have different levels of needs. Some people need more recognition than others. Some people need that like hello and some pleasantries in order to feel connected to you. Other people don't. But here's some really basic things that you can just be more aware of. And this is a slide that you could take this and just kind of do a reflection activity with your teams or on your own about, are we hitting the mark on all these things, and how do we know? I love this quote from Stephen Covey. This is the author of The Speed of Trust. I did a training based off of this book a few years back, and I've used those lessons throughout my career as a leader. Trust is the most overlooked, misunderstood, and underutilized asset to enable performance. Its impact, for good or bad, is dramatic and pervasive. It's something you can't escape. And I include that here because my experience in our consulting work absolutely validates this quote. And a lot of leaders struggle with the idea that culture work or relationships or the idea of trust is very ambiguous. It can often feel like an extra add-on thing that is not core business. We're not usually measured on trust. We're measured on our customer service delivery. We're measured on the quality of the product that we deliver. We're measured on staying on budget. We're measured on, possibly retention. Like, why are we losing people? But often the trust factor and the relationships gets overlooked. And the reason that we wanted to focus on relationship building as a retention solution is because this is something you have control over. And we know that there's a lot of external factors in the ecosystem of your organizations that you don't have control over. You have budgetary restrictions, you have time restrictions, you have probably competing priorities with different leaders and different stakeholders in your organization. But you have 100% control over how you show up, how you communicate with people, and your ability and willingness to know and respond to the needs of your employees. And what we have experienced and what we know from our work with our partners is that's one of the most powerful things you can do to fully engage your staff and keep your best employees. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of trust. And I think you're all here because you already kind of know and value that there might be something here. So I might be preaching to the choir a little bit. We can go through this kind of quickly. But this and the next few slides is all backed by both a collection of research and also our own experience at DMC and the partner work that we do. It's not coming from nowhere. So trust impacts your employees' ability to perform their work. It does increase or decrease their level of motivation, their productivity. Ultimately, all of that relates to the product or service quality that you're outputting, profitability for your company, how collaboration goes, and also retention of your employees. These are all things that have been tied through data to trust in the quality of your relationships in your organization. These are some numbers that came from a study done by Paul Zak, who is a neuroscientist and professor of economic science at Claremont Graduate University. This is decades of research that him and his team have found that people in low companies compared to people in, low trust companies compared to people at high trust companies. High trust companies have employees who experience 74% less stress, 106% more energy at work, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more satisfaction with their lives, and 40% less burnout. So think about this. If you're an employee at a high trust organization and you feel that much less stressed, that much more energized at work, more productive, fewer sick days, you feel more engaged, you're more satisfied with your life, and you're not burnt out, are you leaving that company? Probably not. So this is why we make the connection between the quality of your relationships and the level of trust in your organization and the actual business outcomes that a lot of your, especially senior leaders and your board members, are looking for. This came from a study that Deloitte did this year on trust within organizations. 97% of employees who trust their employer also feel more motivated to work. So when you hear leaders say like, how do we get more out of, everyone wants more out of their employees, right? Like, I just wish everyone wanted to roll up their sleeves and work and get after it and be as passionate about our mission as I am. And trust is how you get there. And sometimes it can feel hard to know how to reach people, but it's the relationships. And we're going to get into the actual how to do that. These are the trust builders. So thinking about strategies and the things that impact trust, basically what you're looking at here is meeting the needs that we went over in a slide a few slides ago. These are the types of things that will build trust. Clear expectations, follow through, personal accountability shows that you have integrity, collaboration involving other people in the decisions that have to be made in your organization, transparent communication. A lot of leadership teams feel like they need to hold things close to the chest, and actually being more intentional and transparent with your communication will help people feel seen and heard and understood, and they'll know the landscape that they're in, and that's going to make them feel more self-assured and safer navigating the environment of your organization. Empathy and consideration are also really huge. The more that you show people that you care about their experience, the more they're going to trust that you have their best interest at heart. And then also demonstrated competence. People need to see that you're capable of doing the role that you're being asked to do within your organization. And then these are the things that break trust. So as you look at these, something you can do a self-reflection. You can reflect on your organization or your department. To what extent are these things happening? To what extent have you been kind of sucked into gossip every now and then? How do you know if it's venting? How do you know if it's productive problem solving versus are we actually just gossiping? Because that is really, really toxic. Lack of follow through, poor communication, inconsistency. Sometimes that looks like upholding policies in some cases, but not others. When your employees see that, they don't know, they can't trust the ground that they're walking on now. When needs go unmet, micromanaging, disrespect and exclusion. These are all things that are going to put people on their heels. They're going to say, I don't know if I can be my full self here. I don't trust this. I don't trust the organization, or I don't trust that person. I'm not sure I can trust leadership. These are the things that either help or hinder. So take a second with your notebook and pen, and I want you to write down some of the key relationships that you have within your organization. And there's a couple of prompts on the side there that help you can kind of like get some ideas going. But But actually write the names down. Don't just write down my boss. So I will say your boss and your direct reports are probably two really key, huge relationships, but also think about who are the people in the organization that you have to collaborate with fairly frequently? Who are the decision makers within your organization? People that you want to be able to have a positive influence on if you've got to get things done. And then everybody needs a support system. And if you can't think of one for every category, that's okay. We just want you to start thinking about what are the key relationships within your organization. And maybe you came here with something in mind. Maybe there's a person or a group of people or just some generalized trust issues or conflict. Whatever intention, this is kind of meant to have you set an intention for the relationship or some kind of key relationship that you want to improve as we go through some of our content. So I'll give you a couple seconds to think of the key relationships that you need to maximize, that you need to have full trust, and trust goes both ways. You're on the giving end of trust and the receiving end of trust always too. So that's something to think about. And then as you come up with some of those names, I want you to think about how trusting are those key relationships. And you don't have to rate every single one. It might be good for the purpose of this session just to pick one, maybe, or one or two that you want to kind of focus on and set an intention behind. But what would your level of trust be? What level of trust do you feel within that relationship? So 1 is low, 10 being full 100% trust, no problems. And don't overthink it. The best thing is to just kind of, the first thing that really comes to mind, jot it down. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're not going to share it with me or anyone else. This is just for you. And there's a few questions on the screen here to then, once you have a rating, explain that to yourself. Think about what is contributing to the level of trust within that organization, within that relationship. So if you rated that relationship as a 6 out of 10, 6 is good. It's not 1. It's not 0. So what is it that's making that a 6 and not a 2? That's something to build. That's some progress. That's some success to build on. And then on the other side, why isn't it a 10? Or if you rated one as a 3, why is it a 3 and not a 7? So just to think about what are the factors that are for you that are contributing to the dynamics of that. And if anyone, as you kind of come up with things, if anyone would like to throw some factors in the chat here that you're seeing is positively or negatively impacting the trust level, I would love to see what people are coming up with. Micromanagement, yeah. Following through, backing up your words, feeling supported. And you can already see some of the themes that we've talked about that we know are impacting trust. Accountability, yes. And something to think about too, as you answer these questions, these are indicators of what you personally value and what you personally need to feel trust within your relationships. And the more aware you can be of that, the better you can advocate for yourself and repair trust and ask for what you need. Communication, aligning on the same goals and mission. Availability, supportive. And then a last question to think about is number 4 on the screen here. Wherever you rated that relationship, what would it take to increase that rating by 2 points? Because that becomes then a possible next step. That becomes something that you can bring to work tomorrow, you know? It could be something that starts a conversation with this person, or it could inform, maybe you go, if I need XYZ, how can I get that? What do I need to do? Maybe you need to do something different. Maybe you need to ask for something different from someone. And this activity, this reflection process, you can apply this to so many things. So it's a really great tool to use to kind of benchmark, temperature check, relationships. In this case, we're talking about the level of trust. This is an activity that you can and should do, periodically. Relationships are ever evolving and growing and changing, and it's important to have moments where you check in and self-reflect. And you can use that prompt, scale of 1 to 10, understand and define the rating that you gave it, and then what would it take to move the dial a little bit. Sometimes that's a good way to break down problems that feel like mountains and just say, you know what, here's one thing I can do tomorrow that might make a positive impact. I'm curious, before we move on, is there any ideas for number 4? Like what would it take to increase your rating? I'm curious if anyone would like to share what yes, unstructured time together. Yes. We have seen that a lot with our partners, in fact. It's so simple. Just create space for people to connect as human beings, where there isn't an agenda. It's not that monthly meeting. It's not the weekly one-on-one. It's an opportunity just to be together and see what happens. Honesty, integrity, respect. Yes. Accountability, transparency, kindness, open, honest conversations. Yes. So that really brings us open, honest conversations. Great transition. We're going to get into some practical strategies here. So if trust is about expectations that are consistently met, something that you really need to be able to do is understand people's expectations. Sometimes they're going to tell you directly. Sometimes they're not going to tell you directly. That's why we're going to look at communication. So the more explicitly and directly you can explore and discuss and align on the expectations you have of people individually in terms of your own individual relationship, but also organizationally, the more successful you're going to be. Because we see a lot of problems, a lot of mistrust is rooted in miscommunication. So as an example, there are different expectations that come with different relationships. I have maybe different expectations of my boss in terms of how he relates to me and what I need from him that I might have of one of my colleagues. If I'm not a team lead right now, but in the past I have managed other people, I expect something different. There's a different relationship I have with my team that I supervise compared to my peers, compared to my boss. So that's why we want you to think about the different relationships and then what are some of the expectations that you have. And it's possible that some of even your own expectations, you're sitting here going like, well, they're not this and they're not that and my needs aren't being met. How explicitly have you communicated what your needs are? And that's what we're going to get into. So what you're seeing is a communication loop. This concept is not something that DMC made up. I am not going to take credit for the communication loop. You can Google it. There are a lot of different versions out there. This is our kind of iteration of that concept. And this could be its own 2-hour training if we really wanted to do a deep dive, but we're going to keep it high level. So effective communication is basically transferring information so that that information is interpreted and applied in the way that you intend. So you have a sender, you have some type of message or piece of information. You need to create the message that you're going to deliver. You need to select the right channel. There are a lot of different channels. We have verbal and nonverbal communication. We have emails, we have Teams, right? We have video webinars. There are a lot of different channels even within an organization. So thinking about the best way to relay the type of information that you're giving. There's trainings within an organization. Some people do team meetings. Some people have town halls. That's the huge, full department or the full organization town hall. So what's the right channel for the message? And then on the receiver end, you have interpreting the message. So the receiver has to actually access the channel, which means they have to open their email. They have to listen to the words that are coming out of your mouth. They have to attend the team meeting or the town hall. Or they have to pick up the phone, read their text message, right? You have to receive it somehow and then interpret. You take the information, you make sense of it, and then you're going to do something with it. There's either a response or an action that you're intending, right? When you send a message, you want someone to do something with it. And then the last piece, which is a very often missed step in effective communication, is verifying that the information that you sent was received, interpreted, and applied the way you intended. And then in the middle there, you see noise and interference. So that is anything along that loop that disrupts effective flow and application of the information. And there's a lot of different types of interference, everything from physiological interference. I'm really hungry and I haven't slept in 2 days, so I'm really not going to think very critically and listen to what you're saying. It could be technical interference. My mic isn't working, or I'm muted so you can't hear me. And what we see a lot interpersonally is different communication styles, or just failure to relay messages. People interpret things differently based on their own experiences and values. There are so many ways that information gets lost or misused or misinterpreted throughout your organization. But you have a lot of control. You have more control than you think. And if you can kind of look at the different flows of information, either between you and one of your key relationships, you could look at this and apply it to organization communication. I mean, how many times have you heard, well, how do they not know I sent an email? You know, we've one of our current partners has said, how do they not know this? It was in a memo. We sent it. Now they think they can't do X, Y, Z, but we told them that they could. It was in this memo. And you have to go, okay, well, there was something that got interfered with, right? Just because you sent the message doesn't mean it was received, interpreted, applied. And if you don't verify, then you don't know. And verification can just look as simple as like creating space to ask, hey, did you get that email? Hey, we made this change, we announced this change, and I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions about it. What questions do you understand? Or what questions do you have? Tell me how you understand what I just relayed to you. So that's the verification where you check in on understanding, and it has to happen directly with the audience that you sent a message to. So the communication loop is the mechanism by which you align on expectations and also demonstrate your follow through. And so I'll give an anecdote. So dependability was, a couple people said dependability in here. We've seen that as a huge theme that has impacted trust in relationships within organizations. And I was working with a supervisor. We were doing one-on-one coaching, and the individual had gotten some feedback from their team. They scored a little bit low on an employee feedback survey on dependability and follow through. And I'd been working with this person for a while, and I thought, I don't think this is right. Like, I think you are someone who is very dependable. It's a core value of yours. I don't think you're intentionally dropping the ball. I know how hard you're working, but there's a gap here. Your team does not experience you consistently as dependable. And what we figured out was it was just closing the loop on the actions that supervisor was taking. So when their team came to them with a problem, that supervisor would go, okay, I'm going to look into it. And then they go off and do they go about looking into it. Sometimes that requires sending an email up the chain or pulling in other resources. Meanwhile, that employee is not sitting next to that supervisor watching them take all those action steps. They're going about their business. If they never hear back from you, they don't know what action you have taken. So thinking about how can you demonstrate your follow through? And for that example, for that supervisor, what they started doing was sending a quick follow-up email to let them know what action they took. Hey, we had a conversation a couple days ago, wanted to let you know that I did send so-and-so this email. I asked them these questions. I'm still waiting to hear back. I will let you know when I do. And now you've closed the loop, because that person, people only know what they experience, what they see or hear. So if they don't hear from you, they have no idea what action you've taken or not taken. So that's one example of how to use the communication loop to show your dependability, as well as set expectations. So a couple strategies that you can use to use the communication loop and improve communication. One is to assess your communication channels. Can you recognize where there are communication gaps within your key relationships? And the bullets on the screen here there's a couple of reflection questions and prompts that you can use. You can either use it right now, think about the relationship that you rated, and think about, when were there times where you felt misaligned, frustrated. Anytime you're kind of extra level of stress, frustrated, that's a good flag. Usually that, maybe we missed something. Maybe there's a communication gap here. Anytime that there was information you wished you had had that you didn't receive, that's a good sign that there was a gap or a communication breakdown. Think about how informed you feel about what's going on with the department or the bigger picture overall? And are there any projects, processes, or events that just have been happening or recently happened that you go, you know what, that was a little more complicated than it needed to be. That was a little more stressful than it really needed to be. Those are good signs. If you can notice that, instead of just what usually happens is people will kind of vent or complain to someone like, what a mess that was. Oh, well, on to the next thing. But actually notice those things and recognize this is an opportunity. It's an indicator that communication has broken down. And these are like, this is where when I say this isn't extra work, your trust is being built or broken in every action that you take, every project that you're running, every event that you put on, every email that you send. It's not extra work. It's the work you're already doing. And how can you bring more intentionality to that work? So taking time to assess your communication channels is a really good strategy. And those moments of frustration or stress or when things get messy and complicated, that is usually, don't just kind of survive it and move on to the next thing. Stop and look at it, because you might be able to actually solve a problem and improve trust and communication in the future. Another strategy from the communication loop is to set clear expectations and verify understanding. These are two things that are often overlooked. They're missed. And the best way to figure out if you're doing that well is to ask your employees. And also look at their behavior. If they're not doing the things that you need them to do, the first question to ask yourself is, did I set a clear expectation? Do they understand it? So that's a first step. And another strategy is, as we've talked about, demonstrate your follow through and understand that people don't know what you're doing unless you tell them or unless they see it and experience it directly. So sometimes that trust is broken down simply because you didn't take the step to show what you've done or show. And if you do drop the ball and you miss something, because we're human, taking accountability can help repair the trust that's broken. So just know, if you miss a deadline, that does break a little bit of trust, and you do have to own that. But if you can demonstrate, hey, I recognize that I missed this deadline, here's what happened, in the future, I'm gonna do X, Y, Z ahead of time. Maybe you knew you were gonna miss the deadline, but you should have let your boss know. Hey, I just want you to know I got this curveball, this curveball, this curveball, competing priorities, and I need to align with you on what you expect of me to get done by the end of this week. If you can do that ahead of time, instead of just feverishly trying to do your best and maybe something drops, or maybe you pull an all-nighter and you get it all done and you're stressed out, if you can try to have those conversations ahead of time, that is all, those are all actions that are going to improve the level of trust with you and your stakeholders. Now we're moving on to emotional intelligence and how to leverage that within your relationships. So there's two elements to emotional intelligence. And this is another training that we could probably spend just an hour on, just this topic. But we're going to stay a little high level. And again, we're just trying to give you some anecdotes and some tips and strategies that whatever resonates with you, you can take and do something with immediately. So two sides to emotional intelligence. It's self and then it's other. So the self-awareness is understanding, recognizing, understanding, and then managing your own emotions and needs. And then the other side is empathy. So recognizing and responding to the emotions and needs of others. And when you do both of these things really well, this is what it gets you. You're going to be much more adaptable. You're going to be able to embrace change, be open to new ideas. You're going to be able to be a more authentic leader. You're going to be able to work with integrity and follow through even when things are stressful, because you're going to have the self-awareness to know what your values are and how you need to show up, and the self-control to show up in that way even when it's hard. And you're also going to be able to show up and recognize you're in your team and help other people do the same thing. If you have the ability to empathize and positively influence others, to support others, that's really, really powerful, critical skill for every leader and really anyone within your organization. These are two skills that are really critical in resolving conflict, and points of conflict are huge opportunities for building trust. People think conflict is just bad. It's not bad. It's going to exist within your organization. You cannot coexist and do hard things and deal with challenges without having some level of conflict. You have different communication styles. You have different roles within your organization. People have different functionalities and they have different perspectives that they're bringing to the table, different things that they care about and value. Those are going to clash. So when you have conflict, are you able to manage yourself and your emotions and stay calm and cool, are you able to help others do the same thing? Are you able to recognize and care for the emotions and needs of others in those moments? Because it's a huge opportunity to build trust. The way you handle conflict will either make your organization stronger or weaker. And the other piece is growth mindset. The more you can leverage self-awareness and empathy, the better you're going to be able to receive feedback and learn from mistakes, as well as your successes, and ultimately become better. In the interest of time, I think I kind of just said what's on these slides. So basically just looking at, what does self-awareness mean? And so it's the level of understanding you have with yourself. What are your values? What triggers you? What's ultimately kind of driving your behaviors? Knowing your strengths and weaknesses is really important, because that'll help you kind of strategize how to approach your problems. And all of that is kind of knowing and managing self. So here's an activity that's something you can do right now in this moment. You take a few minutes and think about these questions. This is also a collection of questions that you could take away from this session and give yourself 15 minutes at the end of your work week every Friday, or maybe you do it on a Monday to kick things off and set some intentions. But this is some things that can help you kind of increase your self-awareness. So one, when have I found myself feeling frustrated or stressed out this week? If you ask yourself that on a weekly basis for a month or 2 months, you're going to find some patterns. And that's going to help you become more aware about, usually things that frustrate or stress you out are problems that you need to solve, or values that are being stepped on, or needs that are not being met. But if you pay attention to it and you notice the patterns, then you can start to solve the problem. 2, what behaviors in others make you feel disrespected or angry? So that's going to get to the same thing. That's really, when you can identify that, you're feeling disrespected and angry in those moments because of the values that you have. And everybody's a little bit different. Everybody has a need to be treated with respect, but you're going to find different things disrespectful. You're going to find that different things bother you or anger you. So, if you've noticed, a lot of these questions is when there's a problem, when there's a conflict, when there's a mess, don't survive it and run away. Turn around and look at it. That's where productive things happen. Be honest, be real. And you're gonna learn so much more about yourself, so much more about your key relationships, the other people you're working with, if you turn and look at it. These are also questions you can ask other people. You could ask your boss this question. You could ask any of your direct reports this question. You could ask a peer this question. And then 3 is gonna be speaking more to the self-regulation. What activities help me feel calm? When I'm stressed out, when I get angry, how do I regulate myself? What do I need to do? Is it get outside and go for a 5-minute walk? Is it listen to some music? I think on the next slide, here we've got a couple things. These are a couple suggestions that help you regulate. Number 1, do not respond to something when you're upset. If you're writing a really long email, that email is like 3 or 4 paragraphs, you probably should just leave it in the draft box. Give it a second. Go for a walk. Taking deep breaths, that sounds kind of cheesy, but take deep breaths is something that will actually physiologically bring your body back down to baseline. Getting outside, the sunshine, also very good for you. And also remind yourself that everyone's behavior has everything to do with them and very little to do with you. If they're bringing a problem to you, it's not a personal attack. If they're agitated, angry, and you might feel criticized, they might not be showing up as their best self in that moment. It's nothing to do with you. Probably at the root of it, when everyone's calm, it's an unmet need. It's a value that's being stepped on. It's a protection mechanism. Maybe they're protecting their own ego, their pride, or their reputation, what have you. And if you are able to regulate yourself and remind yourself that this isn't really about me, that's going to keep you calm. That's going to keep you in a state of mind that will enable you to solve problems better, and resolve the conflict better. Another thing that will build your resilience, building your resilience is something that's going to help you stay regulated. So we're still in the self-regulation topic here. Recognize your strengths and contributions to your team. And you should do this proactively, and you can also do this in the moment when you're frustrated and maybe you feel criticized, maybe you dropped the ball, maybe you are about to have your performance review and you're going to have some positive and maybe some negative feedback. If you're a little sensitive to that kind of thing, build yourself up. You should know what you bring to the table, and doing that is going to make you more resilient to challenges, to conflict, to criticism. So, I asked you for your superpowers, right? Some of you shared what your superpowers are. That's good. You should know what your superpower is. So, and this is another thing you could add to a weekly or monthly reflection that you do with yourself. You have total control over this. What am I proud of this week? What am I proud of this month? What have I contributed positively to the team? It's nice to get recognition from your boss and your peers. That you should, hopefully that does happen, but that you should also be able to recognize all of that in yourself. What are your strengths as a professional? And what did you absolutely knock out of the park recently or this year? If you can regularly tap into that is, again, it's going to make you more resilient to criticism, to conflict, to stress, and that's going to allow you to kind of stay baseline and regulated. Now we're going to get into the empathy, and this is a really interesting, some interesting stats from a PwC study this year on trust in U.S. businesses. And this is illustrating a gap in perceptions. 86% of business executives think employees' trust is high. However, 87% of employees say they highly trust their employer. That is a gap. 86% of executives say they highly trust their employees. However, 67% of employees feel highly trusted. So what that is saying is the executives are like, oh yes, absolutely, we trust our people. And the people are saying, no, they don't. So there is a gap there. And this is where the empathy, this is why we're going to talk about empathy. And even that communication loop comes into play here. Because how are the executives in this study communicating and demonstrating trust to their employees? Because there's a gap here. You can't just say it or think it if you're not showing it. If you say it on a survey, but you're micromanaging your people, or sometimes certain QA measures can make people feel really like under a microscope or not trusted. The way you talk to people, there's a lot of things that communicate that I don't trust you. And so there's a gap. I think that's important because we do see this in our work. This happens everywhere. That there's a gap, and there's a difference between what sometimes a leader who's a little bit more removed from the work that's happening on the ground understands, in terms of the employee experience. So empathy in consideration, that is the solution. Learn about the experiences and needs, values, challenges of your staff. You have to ask them. You have to connect with them. It's either surveying, it could be listening sessions, it could be job shadowing, it could be just making time to go out and make small talk with people. Ask them questions. And then when you get those insights, you have to respond. Don't just do the employee survey and say, we want to hear what you think, and then do nothing with it. Because when an employee takes the time to fill out a survey and then they don't see anything happen, that breaks trust. That's going to build cynicism, and they're not going to keep giving you their feedback. So respond to that when you learn about what's going on with your employees. Respond by implementing employee-informed strategies, and you have to explicitly tell them what you learned from them. It's not enough just to take the report and go, okay, everyone, we got to do this and this. I've seen it so many times where an employee will say, well, they don't listen to us. They never apply our feedback. And I've sat in a middle management position thinking, I know that our senior leaders are absolutely applying feedback, but this person doesn't think so. So what's the gap? Because you didn't get communicated back. And you have to, if you make a change and say, hey, we're doing this now, tell them it's specifically because we heard from you all that you want XYZ, and here's our solution. And then measuring your progress along the way is huge. And that, again, that could be its own training as well. But what are the key performance indicators? And some of it could be if you have an employee engagement survey that you send out on any kind of regular basis, you could literally measure trust by asking them, to what degree do you trust your supervisor? To what degree do you trust your peers, the organization as a whole? So think about what the benchmarks and measurement are of trust and the quality relationships within your organization, and track it regularly. So empathy is the ability to tune into the emotions and perspectives of others. You achieve empathy through observing, noticing people, and also asking questions, active listening. If there's a problem, it's really easy to get defensive, but empathy is the first step to solving the problem. And you have to be able, that's where the self-regulation comes in. If you as a leader can kind of sit and receive and just let people feel heard, that is going to go a long way. But if you get defensive and you put up your walls and you make excuses or explain things away, all that's going to do is hurt the trust. That employee is going to say, I knew it, they don't care, they're not listening, and they're not going to be as likely to be vulnerable and open with you in the future. And you need empathy. I've had leaders tell me that, being too empathetic, you're not going to get anything done. You can't just validate everything everybody says. And I think it's a huge miss, because you have to understand where people are and what they care about in order to positively influence them. And that's not about manipulation. It's just the way humans work. Someone who feels like you actually get them and you're taking them into consideration, they are much more likely to listen to you when you tell them they need something. You need something from them. If I have an employee, I've had people on my team where I'm like, okay, this person is doing this administrative thing wrong. They were not logging their calls with our students in the system correctly. They're not a task-oriented person. They're a people-oriented person. So they place value on the relationship and the conversation with the student, making sure they're taken care of. And then they're on to the next thing. They didn't do that administrative task. I need to talk to that person on their level by their values to say, let me connect how doing this, logging calls correctly, is actually going to help you serve your students better. And by doing that with that individual, instead of just saying, listen, you're not logging your calls correctly, go log your calls, or you're going to be put on a performance improvement plan, right? That would not have resonated. That's going to be that's fear-based. That's going to get compliance, maybe. But if I say, listen, this is important. It is an expectation that you're logging your calls. But I want you to understand why. And if you log your calls and you take good notes, you're going to be better prepared the next conversation you have with that student to support them even better. And that is going to build trust and also inspire someone based on what they care about. So empathy is an important tool to build trust and also get the business results that you're looking for. Here's a couple of questions. So empathy is really about curiosity, active listening. These are a series of questions. Again, you're going to get these slides. This is something that you can ask yourself. These are questions that you can also ask somebody else. So in this context, we're talking about empathy. So these are some things you could bring, like going back to that key relationship you rated. These are this is a good place to start to try to understand them a little bit better. What are your values when it comes to the work that we do? You're going to get something different from different people. Some people value efficiency. Some people want to know that everyone's as passionate as they are about the work that they're doing and the purpose of the organization. Some people really value collaboration. Like, I need to know that I'm a valued member of the team. Otherwise, I'm going to disengage. What is important to you about this? That's a really good open-ended question you can use with almost anything. If you're starting a project, if there was a conflict, absolutely anything, to say, especially when someone seems upset, what's important to you about this? But you can use this on the front of things too to get ahead of it. Like, what do they care as it comes to doing this work or delivering on this? What do they care about? What situations, actions frustrate you? That usually gives you a sense of what people's values and needs are. And what would you like me to know about you as a colleague that will improve our working relationship? These are really amazing questions that you can, you don't have to throw all of them at someone, tomorrow, but pick one, it'll get the conversation started, and the more you learn about them, the more that you can respond. Okay, I have 1 minute. I'll summarize quickly. High trust organizations have happier, more engaged, and productive employees who are less likely to leave. All of that is backed by not only decades of research, but I can absolutely validate that in my work as a consultant. It's super, super important. That trust is built by aligning on expectations and then consistently following through on meeting them. The communication loop is a huge mechanism you can leverage to do this. So assess your communication channels. Make sure you're setting really clear expectations. Don't assume that you are. You have to validate that. Verify understanding of your audience. that your message was received and interpreted well, and then demonstrate your follow through. People only know what they see, what you show them, what you tell them. Don't assume that they know, because they don't. Self-awareness is your ability to understand and manage your own emotions and needs. Empathy is recognizing and responding to the emotions and needs of others. And at the end of the day, this is a great quote from Paul Zak, who is, I think I mentioned him earlier. Managers can cultivate trust by setting a clear direction, giving people what they need to see it through, and then getting out of their way. In short, to boost engagement, treat people like responsible adults. That's a really simplified version of basically everything we just went through. And here's an action item for you as we kind of wrap up. And I know we're at our hour. If you have to pop off, I understand. We're going to get these slides to you. But if you can take another minute to think about, from this session, what is one thing that you could do in the coming week that would improve communication? One thing you could do that could increase your self-awareness? One thing you could do that could demonstrate empathy? Thank you all so much for joining. We're going to follow up with, we'll send everybody the slides and also some opportunities to join if you're not already connected to our podcast, we have a newsletter, our website, and we're on a ton of social media platforms. So we'll send you everything you need to connect with us there. And this is my email if anyone would like to contact us and schedule a call to learn more about how DMC can support your organization. We would love to hear from you. So there's my email. Reach out if you have any questions that weren't answered. I would be happy to chat with anybody. So please feel welcome to shoot me an email there. And whether you're interested in working with us, we can talk about that. Or if you just want to follow up and have some questions from this session, be happy to dialogue with anyone. So thank you very much for coming, everyone.